Hello, my name is Rayvon Williamson. I'm formerly incarcerated. I served 27 years, literally to the day, incarcerated. I was born to a single mother. My mother had me at 16 years old. And on the most part, I would say for the first 10 years of my life or so, um, you know, I thought my life was pretty good, you know. Um, but then things began to develop or change, I should say. My mother became addicted to crack cocaine, and that immediately changed the dynamic of our home. So at 10 years old, I like to describe it as like a role reversal kind of happened. I became the more mature or responsible person in the home. At the time, it was myself, my mother, and my little sister. Um, so as her addiction grew and became worse, my mindset became, what could I do to either, quote unquote, save my mother or at least protect my home? I had grew up in a gang environment, but again, up until that point, I really had no desire to join a gang. So as I looked, in my neighborhood, the place I had grown up, I looked for that example. What type of man or what type of individual I could be that could protect my home or some way, control my environment. For me, at that age, at least in my mind, the two prominent examples that I saw was quote unquote the successful drug dealer or the individual who was considered the rider, the individual who would fight, shoot, rob. These were my two examples, or those are the two examples that seemed most prevalent for me at the time. I had shot and paralyzed a security guard at the SWAT meet in my neighborhood because I felt, he had disrespected me, stopping me from, harassing other patrons or stealing out the SWAT meet. To me, that was a form of disrespect, In my mind, now, this is my neighborhood. How dare you? So one morning, I decided that I would go before opening, meet him as he got out of his car, and I shot him. I was sent to youth authority with a sentence of 13 years, I want to say 13 years, 8 months, and I end up doing 3 years, 8 months. Yeah, so I was released from youth authority at the age of 17. And I was home for all of 4 months before committing my committing offenses that ultimately sent me to prison with a life sentence. Being a validated gang member, it comes with, a 6-month sentence to your first shoe term. You just get that off the top, right? Everything after that, I think it adds a year. Here it is, I'm facing a new criminal charge. So I'm talking about a life sentence on top of the life sentence that I already have. And then, the indeterminate shoe. So now I'm finna be removed from this status, this space I done carved out for myself, and I'm now left to deal with myself. And that was very scary. And I had this open dialogue with myself. Either I'm finna give myself wholly to this gang lifestyle, to this prison culture, or I'm gonna do whatever I can in this space to make something of my life, whether I get released or not. In 2008, my grandfather passed away in April 2008. In May of 2008, my grandmother passed away. In December 2008, my mother passed away. So anything that I considered to be like my foundation, my support, my rock, was now gone, right? So what I received in that, or what I understood in that, is that now I have to stand as a man. Now I'm responsible for, what happens with my life moving forward. I have no one to call, I have no one to lean on. And at that point, that's when I began to really search out other programs, rehabilitative programs. The church program I was at Calipatra at that time was like a mini university, right? So it was really men there who had already given themselves to the faith, who had began to study and then teach other men. Where, when you come out of that culture, out of that lifestyle, walking into a church is like a big hurdle in and of itself. But it was there that I was really embraced as a man, as a friend, as a brother, and given those identities, those labels with, love attached. There was no expectation for me to perform. There was no expectation for me to be or do anything other than myself. So that really, where my identity began to take shape. I had over 100 points at one time, right? But here it is now, my points are like down there in the 20s or the early 30s to where I can be transferred to a level 3 facility. So I had a couple of places of mine. I want to go to CMC or, Ironwood, somewhere like that, start programming. Lo and behold, CDCR, somebody else had a plan other than my own, where I ended up in Vacaville. In that particular institution, they had so many programs to where, like, for me, I struggled with a choice. Where do I begin? Type of deal. So I ran into other men who helped me navigate that path. And it was at Vacaville that I really began to get engrossed in programs and really began to challenge my thinking, my beliefs. And by that time, I had already been denied. I had gone to board and had been denied 3 years. The commissioners spoke to the possibility. They identified my change. And I think that gave me the greater hope, because here you have the individuals who have the authority, to have an opinion of my rehabilitation or my freedom or not, saying, hey, you have a chance. Hey, you're on the right path. And I think that was the greatest inspiration. So I began to do the work to better understand myself. Why these triggers, why these feelings, why these insecurities. And just going through the programs, I was able to discover these things. I was able to be in a space where I can talk freely about these things and have other men speak to me from that same place without judgment, without shame, but in a way of support, in a way of encouragement. So the moments right before parole, I was in an offender mentor certification program. So I was going through that. And by this time, I had embraced my change. I had embraced who I had become. So, through the process groups and all those things, I was becoming even more comfortable in my own skin. I couldn't go back to my own neighborhood. In fact, I couldn't go back to LA County if I wanted to be successful in my transition from prison into society. So I had determined at that time that I was going to come, to Northern California and Geo to be exact. Geo had did a presentation, had brought some men who were formerly incarcerated, and one of the assistant directors at that time. And it's just the way they presented the program, the way that they spoke of the program, allowed Geo to stand out for me. And I was like, hey, I'm determined to get there. So I was willing to put myself in an environment where I had no one, didn't know anyone, wasn't familiar with the environment, because I believe the same triggers wouldn't be there, the same temptations wouldn't be there. So I end up going to San Francisco. So I get into Geo, and it's a 6-month program. And I had already determined, even though it was a 6-month program, I'm going to work towards an extension. I need to be here a year. I still needed that structure. I still needed that, that outside accountability to kind of help me, toe the line, so to speak. But at the same time, I had no overhead. I had no bills, no responsibilities. At that time, I was not married, nor did I have any children. So there was no direct obligation or expectation in that way. So I knew I just wanted to work hard as I could, save as much money I could, that after that year, I would be in a position to make, sound choices, strategic choices, and be financially stable to do those things and be okay. Within 2 months of my release, I had 2 jobs. And I was just working those jobs, saving my money, doing what I could do. I think my greatest hurdle, realistically, I would say 2. being released and not having identification, not knowing my social security number or not being sure of it, not having my birth certificate. So that whole experience probably was the most challenging, the most uncomfortable. People are asking you questions about yourself. Here it is, at that time, I'm 44. I'm a 44-year-old man that knows nothing about, his personal history. What's your social security number? I don't know. Well, why you don't know? Well, I got incarcerated at 17. But there's this expectation for this 44-year-old man. It's things you ought to know. It's things you ought to have, right? That society unconsciously or maybe even consciously projects onto you. But here it is, now in my body, in my thought process, I'm retreating to that 17-year-old. Like, well, damn it, I don't know, you know what I mean? But you figure it out. So that was probably like one of the more stressful times for me. But once that was taken care of, everything else had been relatively smooth. The second thing is like really understanding how to function in a relationship. I was incarcerated 27 years, and all your relationships are conditional. You begin to understand that. My closest friend in prison understands that if he violates or crosses a certain boundary, the consequence could very well be him getting stabbed, and vice versa. If I cross a line or offend someone to a certain extent, the consequence could be me being stabbed, removed from the yard, or however that may play out. So I understand that this relationship is very conditional, right? Much as I love you, you my boy and all that. And then over that time, again, I was incarcerated 27 years. I mean, I mentioned the loss of my family. Girlfriends come and go, friends come and go. So you have this independent identity. You have this kind of loneliness and distrust that you still carry with you. So I would say that the other challenge has been just really learning how to be in a healthy relationship, no matter where you are in your level of change, right? You're contemplating change, or you've kind of embarked on a journey, but backslid or fell off. I would say really be intentional about how you invest in yourself. Really be intentional. Really step out and into those spaces that are uncomfortable. Really step out into those places where you may not be the smartest in the room. You may not be able to speak to, the information that's being presented. And I say that because the one thing I lacked was really just information. Information in a way of change is possible. Information in a way of I'm worthy of better than this. I'm worthy of better than what I've even demonstrated. And the only way we can grow is that we expose ourselves, to information. We put ourselves in those vulnerable positions to be built up. Put ourselves in those vulnerable positions to expose weaknesses that we may heal and grow from those things. And as much as, we present to be strong, to be men, to be macho, part of that strength has to be allowing yourself to be vulnerable.